Hello, I'm Jane Winter, and it is my great pleasure to host this segment of the Marin Women's Hall of Fame show. Since 1987, the Hall of Fame has inducted 140 Marin women of distinction, women who have made immense contributions to the County of Marin and its residents, as well as to the world beyond. Honorees have distinguished themselves in many fields: education, science, business, philanthropy, the arts, politics, law, philosophy, and religion. Each honoree has been a force for positive change in our community, and it is a great pleasure to acknowledge and document their contributions. And today, it is my privilege to introduce the Honorable Verna Adams, who is being honored in the class of 2016 for her pioneering work in public affairs. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Jane, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I know you're going to ask me some questions, but I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Is this a dream, or is this really happening?
This is really happening to you, Verna. So
well, I'm just delighted.
Just sit back and enjoy the ride.
Okay.
So we're going to take a little bit of a walk down memory lane with you, and I understand that you grew up in Indiana.
I did.
I wonder if you could just maybe tell us a little bit about your family and your upbringing, and maybe talk a little bit about who were some of the early people that were really influential during your formative years.
I'd love to do that. I'm the youngest of 5 children in my family. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, which I have to say was the best place in the world to grow up. I had a happy childhood. My parents were typical middle-class people of the time. My dad worked for a business in town. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And one unusual thing, though, about my parents was that as a result of their religious beliefs, my parents were very, very devout Christian Scientists. And Christian Science is a religion that was started in America by a woman. And one of the tenets, really, of the religion is that there's nothing that women can't do that men can do. And there's really a lack of gender bias in that religion that was part of the gestalt of our family and affected, I think, greatly my subsequent choices in life. And that was a real gift that my parents gave me. I think a lot of little girls in the 50s didn't have that, and I did. I was greatly influenced by my mom and dad. My maternal grandmother was a huge influence on me. She maybe as much as or more than anybody else I can think of just unconditionally loved me. And she was just great, and I just love that old lady. And So there was her, and then there was my
Did she live
teacher.
right in South Bend?
She lived in Blackford County, Indiana, which is further south.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not
Close
too
by.
far away.
No, I was there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's great.
Learning from my grandma.
So I understand that you decided you wanted to be an attorney when you were in middle school.
I did.
And you had never even met a woman who was an attorney. So I'm curious, what drew you to the law? And especially what drew you at such an early age?
I thought about that. There's a Buddhist saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And I think in my case, I think my teachers had identified me as a bright little kid and were very encouraging of me. And at a fairly young age, probably even in grade school, were having me come in after school to do extra projects so I wouldn't get bored in school, and were very encouraging. Think about college. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I must have said to one of them, well, what is it? How about being a lawyer? Maybe I could be a lawyer. And they said, yeah. And I remember when I was a freshman in high school, we had a project to write a paper about a career choice. And I wrote a little paper, I still have it, it was called Law as a Career. And I got an A on my paper. And so I think there was a lot of encouragement. My parents certainly thought that was okay if I wanted to be a lawyer. But I actually think in some ways it was sort of like religious people talk about having a vocation. And I really had somewhere gotten the message loud and clear that that's what I was meant to do.
That was your calling.
That was my calling. And that's what I did.
You know, you were lucky to have gotten your calling so early. I think in today's world, particularly when kids are graduating from high school, there are so many choices that I think it can be very difficult to make, zero in on something and really find your true passion early in life. So I think you were very, very lucky. Okay, you went on to be only one of 3 women who graduated in your class at Stanford Law.
It's true.
So I would imagine that you have faced a few challenges along the way that were really related to you being a woman in a male-dominated field. And I wondered if you could maybe just share with us some of those challenges and how you dealt with that.
It's very important when you're dealing with people who may be a little bit unenlightened not to lose your sense of humor. And I learned that real fast. Mm-hmm. I don't recall at Stanford Law School, other than the odd comment about that I was taking a place that otherwise a man could take, having a lot of hazing about being a woman. It was more that it was just isolating. Being one of 3 women in my class, and every class is a room full of men and then me, and that was, it was kind of lonely. And I think the first time I really had the sense that, a feeling of being treated differently because I was a woman, was after I was already practicing law. And I blush to say that I didn't get that from my male colleagues. I got that from male judges. Mm. And this is back in the 1970s. And I remember one judge, let me back up and say that if a male lawyer vigorously represents his client, he's a good, vigorous advocate for his client. And this judge was complaining loudly about strident women lawyers.
Oh my goodness.
I never heard him say...
This is in the 70s.
In the 70s. And that judge is no longer with us, and I won't tell you his name. But I never heard him say anything about strident men lawyers. Mm-hmm. And other judges would make comments about what I was wearing in court. And I promise you I dressed appropriately when I went to court. I did wear pantsuits, which mm-hmm. were considered a little bit cutting edge.
Okay.
And another judge told me that he really thought I was a pretty good lawyer, and it was too bad that most people just didn't want to hire female lawyers because that would be bad for business. Mm. And Another one criticized me when there was a self-represented litigant client in the courtroom who didn't know how to present her case. So I walked up and said to the judge, is it okay if I ask her the questions because she doesn't know what to do? And he suggested I was committing malpractice, but he let me do it. But it was an uncomfortable time. So things have gotten a lot better.
Yeah, they certainly have. So I do understand also that once you started practicing law, that pro bono work was part of what you wove into your career from the very beginning. I also know here in Marin County that you helped to establish the Family and Children's Law Center, which is still operating, and furnishes low-cost legal services to adults and children involved in family law matters. And you seem to have a particular love for family law. Where did that passion for family law come from?
Good question. As a very young lawyer, it was my great good fortune to see an article in the newspaper about this all-women law firm in San Rafael, headed up by Hall of Fame honorees Ann Diamond and Beverly Savitt. And just on a hunch, I wrote them a letter and asked if they had any openings or if they would talk to me about practicing law in a small town. I was practicing with a big law firm in downtown San Francisco and wasn't really enjoying it. So they had me up to San Rafael. We had lunch at San Rafael Joe's on 4th Street.
That's right. Still there.
It is. And they talked to me and they offered me a job, and they were doing family law. So I have to say, I'm not sure I found family law. I think it found me.
Right.
But I found Ann and Beverly, who are the best mentors and role models a young lawyer could ever have. And so I started doing family law, and I realized that it was a really good fit for me because it was helping real people with their real problems. I wasn't making the world safe for big banks and insurance companies. I was helping real people with real problems and making the world safe for little kids. And many of my Marin County clients were prosperous, and I adopted a somewhat Robin Hood theory of billing my wealthy clients full retail price and then cutting some breaks to those who had less. And it was obvious that we needed to do that on more than just a random lawyers furnishing pro bono legal services to random clients, but rather we needed to institutionalize it in the form of the Family and Children's Law Center. And incidentally, we're about to have the pro bono lunch for the Marin County Bar Association, which is completely sold out. That's going to be next week.
Fantastic. Now, does that raise money for the Family Law Center?
And legal aid, yes.
And legal aid. Yeah. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Beverly Savitt and Ann Diamond, and of course they have both been inducted into the Hall of Fame as well. And I understand that this was the first all-female law practice in the country.
I have heard that.
Okay. Well, we're just going to say it so.
Why not?
So I wonder, you had this experience of going into a big law firm, which I'm sure was probably male-dominated, and then you came to San Rafael and were working exclusively with, female partners.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, how did the fact that they were women and also the fact of who they were, how that influenced your work and development as an attorney?
Oh, it influenced it just tremendously. I don't think that it's possible for most attorneys, at least, to develop and to realize their potential as attorneys without having mentors and role models, people to talk to, people to critique you, people to help you figure out what to do and how to do it. And Ann and Beverly were those people for me, which was my great good fortune. And so they greatly influenced and molded who I am right now. They helped me learn how to practice law. Ann particularly was a pioneer in so many ways, but she was way before mediation and ADR, which is alternate dispute resolution, were in vogue, she was doing it. And she made me understand the great importance, especially in family law, where we're dealing with family systems, people who often are going to have to deal with each other for a very long time because they have children together, to help them resolve their issues at the time of their divorce without any more bad feelings and lingering resentments than are absolutely necessary. So Anne really helped me learn that our adversary system of justice, which we have in this country, and it's the idea that through the clash of conflicting ideas, the truth will somehow emerge. That may be okay in a criminal case or in a car crash case or something like that, but it's not a real good model for family law. Mm-hmm. It causes people to say things and do things that they're going to regret later. So they taught me early how important it is to try to settle cases, mm-hmm. which I did a lot as a lawyer and I'm doing even more of as a judge.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So you've now been on the Marin County Superior Court as a judge for 16 years. You helped to found the Legal Self-Help Center in Marin, and also the Mental Health Court and the Domestic Violence Court. What is the importance of these special programs and special courts within the larger framework of the court system?
Well, the short answer is tremendously important. As time has gone by, our legal system has gotten more and more complicated and more expensive and more inaccessible for even middle class or working class litigants. Some fellow who's making $50,000 a year doesn't have $500 an hour to pay his lawyer, so they're going to be self-represented. And our whole legal system, which is a cornerstone of our democracy, which is a cornerstone of all the freedoms we enjoy in this country, is based on the idea that when people go to court, they're all on a level playing field. And if you have, on the one hand, a person who perhaps has language and cultural barriers, economic barriers, and on the other side of the room, the opposing party has a team of well-trained lawyers, that's not very fair. Mm-hmm. So we've got to make the system as accessible to everybody as we can. And that's where the Self-Help Center comes in. And that's something I saw the need for even before I became a judge. But when I became a judge, it was something we needed to do. There didn't seem to be a lot of momentum in that direction, so I asked the presiding judge, will you let me do something about this? And he said yes, and we formed a team, mm-hmm. a task force, to create the Legal Self-Help Center of Marin. Our first executive director was Hall of Fame honoree mm-hmm. and she was also on the task force that helped create the Self-Help Center. And it was a lot of community stakeholders, probably about 15 of us. And first we were over at 30 North San Pedro Road, and then we moved it right onto the court floor. Mm-hmm. And it's just terrific. Anybody can go there as long as they aren't a lawyer. And we don't ask them how much money they make. They could be very wealthy. But if they're self-represented and they need to figure out how to fill out their forms or mm-hmm. how to find the courthouse or what to do when they get there, that's the place to go. And the Domestic Violence Court was another project of mine that, again, I felt that it's a big problem in this county. It's a big problem everywhere. It's the single
number one crime
in
Marin County, unfortunately.
Number one crime in Marin County. And the idea of Domestic Violence Court is to figure out what's going on in these cases with a view to prevention. Mm-hmm. And to prevent recidivism wherever possible, to help families get past it and get back together again. That's not always possible, of course, but so often it is. So the idea is that with the proper counseling and support, we can take steps toward prevention. And of course, we also know that a big indicator of a domestic violence perpetrator as an adult is someone who saw or was the victim of domestic violence as a child. Mm-hmm. So we really want to...
It's a vicious cycle.
Vicious cycle. And with mental health court, we know that there are people who are involved in the criminal justice system who are not career criminals, but who have mental health challenges. And if we can help them get the support, sometimes the meds, and other support that they need in order to stay out of the criminal justice system, will again avoid recidivism, and this will make Marin a better place to live.
You know, I just think that dealing with mental illness, particularly in the context of you know, a criminal case or some sort of court case, is made so much more difficult because of the lack of services. In that area. And it's interesting that in the 2016 presidential primary season, that's been discussed a little bit. I'd love to see it discussed and become a more central theme for some of these candidates. But, you know, I'm kind of wondering how you've seen the folks that really have mental illness issues and the intersection with the legal system, how you've seen that change over time. Because I think that during the period of time that you started practicing the law, California used to have a pretty good mental health system that got torn apart. And you know, you used to not see people, homeless people on the streets. And all of those things are related. So I'm kind of wondering what your view of mental health and the intersection with the law, how that has changed over the period of time that you've been in the field.
I was thinking about that earlier today, because you're quite right. When I first came to San Rafael in 1971, we didn't have homeless people and people living under the freeway and driving their shopping carts around, because there were safety nets and systems in place that were dismantled. And that, I'm sure, was about finances and budget, and I think there were policy decisions behind it too. And of course, the challenge for the court system is to find ways for folks who need that kind of, or who have a mental health diagnosis, to get support, housing, meds, treatment, job training, all of those things without any money. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge.
It's almost impossible, really.
I know one of our early participants in mental health court, one of our regulars, was Sergeant Joel Fay, who's now retired from the San Rafael Police Department. Joel would go around and we would reward our participants with rewards, and he would go around to places like IHOP and talk them into giving them $10 gift certificates, and then we'd give that to our mental health court participants if they did what we had told them to do. One of our participants, his sentence was every week to go to the mental health care center and play bingo. Mm-hmm. That was part of my sentence as a judge. I was sentencing this fellow to play bingo. It worked.
Well, it must be very rewarding to be able to work with these people and treat people that have legitimate illnesses with dignity. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like we go and persecute people that are sick with cancer, somewhat in the same way that we do with people that are suffering from mental illness. So mm-hmm. I appreciate your work in that area.
Thank you.
So you have also served as the presiding judge of the Marin County Superior Court. And I wonder if you could tell our audience really what a presiding judge is. And also, did you enjoy the experience?
I think in Marin County, being presiding judge is something of a misnomer. I think the term trusted servant would be more applicable. I was very flattered when my colleagues asked me to be presiding judge, and it means that instead of having one full-time job, I more or less have two full-time jobs. In some counties, the presiding judge, that's all he or she does is preside. They don't have a trial calendar, they don't have a caseload. In Marin, our presiding judge is presiding judge and also has a full caseload. So it's intense. And we have a relatively small court. We have 12 judges. We have about 125 staff people, so the presiding judge is in charge of working closely with our CEO to make sure the court's properly administered, that all of our budget and reporting requirements are properly handled. The presiding judge is probably who's called by the press if there is any issue that the press is interested in with the courts, and goes to a whole lot of meetings. But it's important work, and it's important to the running of the court. It frees the other judges up to do their work. And basically, I enjoyed it, but I did find that I had a little more time on my hands when my stint was over.
Right. So this is a position that gets rotated amongst the sitting judges.
It's a two-year.
2 years. 2 years of working double
gig.
time.
Yes.
Working two jobs. So
that's right.
I think the taxpayers get their money's worth out of the presiding judge. I'm wondering, what kind of advice do you have for women in our community, particularly young women, to be fully engaged in supporting our community and each other? What kind of advice would you give women in our audience?
Follow your dream and never, ever, ever give up. And also find a mentor and role model. My advice to the older women is to serve as a mentor and role model to the younger women. It's just hugely important. When I was a young girl, I didn't have any role models. We talked about that. I certainly had mentors, and one of them was my high school Latin teacher, Miss Kazmarek. She taught me Latin, and she taught me how to behave. She taught me to follow my dreams. She taught me to sit up straight. And she just had a lasting impact on my life. And every young girl should have a Miss Kazmarek.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much, Verna, for sharing stories from your incredible life and work with us. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. The Marin Women's Hall of Fame is a project of YWCA San Francisco and Marin. If you'd like to learn more about the Hall of Fame and our honorees, please visit www.mwhf.org. And thank you for tuning in.